may we ask you to come to the front door? And Oliver is on. Give us a yeah, Annie. Yes. E nā mana, e nā reo, e rauranga tirama, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Hi, Remai. Kia ora, welcome. My name is Saka Hitman. I'm double hatting this evening. I welcome you at EY, which is where I spend most of my days to pay the mortgage. And then in my spare time, I'm the Honorary Consul of the Netherlands, as many of you that I know. So welcome also on behalf of the Dutch Embassy. Apologies from our ambassador. He was drawn back to The Hague unexpectedly. And also our Deputy Head of Mission, who's the number 2, was actually on holiday already planned to go. And so I'm number 3. So it's me tonight. So welcome both to EY and welcome on behalf of the Embassy. I think we have other people talking about how beautiful and wonderful my country is. So I won't be doing much of that. We have a panel for that. But before I do hand over to Charlotte from the DBA, who's hosting, just a little bit of housekeeping. In the event of an emergency, please go through this door where you came in. Toilets are on the left. If you follow the toilets, that's also the exit. And then when you go to the bottom of the building, we all meet together at the front of the building here. But that won't happen, hopefully. Okay, let me hand over to Charlotte, and I have to hand over this because we have people online watching as well.
Oh. Right. Yep. Good evening, everybody. Kia ora and goedenavond. Lovely to see all of you. I'm very excited to be here and also hearing all the stories about your visit to the Netherlands. My name is Charlotte. I'm the president of the Dutch Business Association here in Auckland, New Zealand. Last time I was kind of like lingering in the back with a big belly, 8 months pregnant. My twins couldn't really stand, let alone speak. So I'm keen to catch up with some of you afterwards for the people who I haven't spoken to. My twins are now 5 months old, a boy and a girl. I'm very much spending my days in nappy land. I'll try not to speak too much about nappy, breastfeeding, and sleep schedules. And my nights are very interrupted at the moment, so the brain fog is also real, but I'll do my best. First of all, special thank you to NZ Initiative for helping bring everybody together again. And Chelsea, Roger, and Oliver, thank you so much. I also appreciate the little book that we saw here with photos made by Chelsea. So it's always good for us. That brings a bit of nostalgic for us seeing those photos. So for today, so we'll be hearing everything about the visit to the Netherlands, but wanted to start off with a little bit about the DBA. Most of you already know from previous introductions, but the Dutch Business Association has been around here in Auckland, New Zealand since 1993. And over the years, we've built quite a strong, active Dutch community here in New Zealand. Just to give you some context, we have, I think I'm looking at Saka, but we have around 150,000 Dutch people in New Zealand, of which 40,000 passport holders. Is that still the list? Yeah. So we like to bring people together. Obviously, a lot of people are here in Auckland, but we're also interested in having some presence in Wellington and Christchurch. We recently had an event in Christchurch, and we are predominantly a networking organization. And on top of that, we organize events throughout the year on various business topics across various industries. So it's all very exciting things, but mainly we try to help people connect Kiwi professionals who have an interest in the Netherlands or Dutch businesses that want to invest here in New Zealand. So that's our key objective from the organization, and we also work closely with the Dutch Embassy, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, European business units, and basically all of our neighboring European countries who have business association here. Some of them are in the room, looking at Frank Olsen in the back, who most of you might have known. And yeah, our network includes around 500 people at the moment, and we're also supported by corporate sponsorships like Heineken, Rabobank, Randstad, Philips, all names that some of you might know. And as a business organization, we always try to look at 5 years ahead, but we exist out of a board of volunteers. So we're all doing this alongside our day jobs or maternity leave. But we have been looking at the next year's what is coming for the next year. And I just want to highlight 2 events that we have scheduled. One of them is on the 26th of February, which is a networking event that is happening in Wellington at the Dutch residency. So it's the Kingdom of the Netherlands, where the ambassador will be present as well. And then we have field days in June. So first time ever there will be a big orange Dutch pavilion. I always say paviljoen, but that's Dutch. Pavilions with Dutch companies showcasing the latest in agriculture and horticulture. So if anybody's interested hearing more about that, please come and visit Martijn, who's over there in the back of the corner, can tell you all about that. And so for tonight, so our last gathering was the 30th of April, and I can't believe we're now almost at the end of the year already. So I'm very excited hearing about the trip and getting some insights what the most interesting things were. So we'll start off with Dr. Oliver Hartwich, just a little bit of a quick recap of your insights, your experiences, and then we'll hear from Fraser before Saka will guide us through a little bit of a Q&A, and then it's basically drinks and nibbles for the rest of the evening.
Sounds good.
I'll hand over
Thank
to you.
Well, thanks, Charlotte, and thanks to the Dutch Business Association. It's great to be with you. Where do we start? Maybe I'll start with a personal. I've got one. It's all under control. I'm German. I was actually going to start with because I joked a little bit to our group on our first night in Amsterdam on that Sunday night. For me, the trip felt a little bit like a homecoming because I am from Germany and actually not too far from the Netherlands. It takes about an hour by train or car actually to drive from Essen to the Dutch border. So I actually stayed the night before the trip with my parents in Essen, took the train the next day and crossed into the Netherlands. And that journey alone made me realize something else. I mean, I always also joke that the Dutch are just like the Germans, except nobody hates them. But that's not entirely true, because what I realized on that little train journey already was that as soon as I crossed the German-Dutch border, things got better. Where Germany looks a little bit run down these days, Dutch train stations look beautiful, everything was properly organized, and you're probably the real Germans these days. So that's the first bit I wanted to say. The other thing is actually I want to acknowledge just a few people. First of all, Chelsea, not just for taking the pictures in that little report that you see there, but also for planning this once again with me. This was our 4th trip, and I also want to acknowledge a few of the delegates who have been with us on this trip. We've got a few of you here tonight, but I just want to sort out a few people in particular. And that's, first of all, Craig Storrow, and then Roger Bartridge, Bruce Bested, my friend Fraser, and myself, because we 5 here actually attended all 4 of these trips together with Chelsea, of course. And so this is a tradition that started in 2017 with we thought at the time, one-off trip to Switzerland. And the idea was actually to explore a specific policy area in Switzerland. In that case, it was localism, devolution, decentralization, whatever you want to call it. That was the reason why we went to Switzerland. We wanted to figure out how that works and wanted to take some policy learnings back home to New Zealand. But as it happened, when we stood at the hotel bar in Zurich on the last night, people were already asking, that was great, where we're going to go next. And so this became a bit of a tradition over the years. And then, as you know, we visited Denmark in 2019, And we had a COVID break, of course, but in 23 we made it to Ireland. And I see that you still have that Irish pin there, even though we're a Dutch function. Anyway, that's all right. But then, of course, this year it was the Netherlands. And so these policy trips have become a bit of a tradition, and it is an absolute privilege to organize them with the New Zealand Initiative and the Initiative's membership. Because what we bring together is a very high-level business audience, a very sophisticated audience, coming on these trips with us, and for the right reasons, not for their own individual businesses, not to make some new business contacts, not to trade, but actually to be inspired, to find ideas, to learn how other countries are dealing with similar challenges compared to New Zealand, and what we can then hopefully learn and bring back. And that was really the purpose of this trip to the Netherlands as well. We had prepared our group properly this time, I think. We produced quite a few deep research dossiers and turned them into podcasts, so everybody had a rough idea what to expect about clustering in the Netherlands, about the specific approach to deregulation, about individual companies, about Heineken, about the Dutch Stock Exchange, the oldest stock exchange in the world. So we were all, I would say, really well prepared for the experience, and yet nothing could have really prepared us for what we then learned on the ground, because it is completely different just reading about it or hearing about it and experiencing it. And actually, for me, that was the biggest learning this time. It was not the policies that we took home, and we came across many policies and some really inspirational policies. It was actually the culture that we found. So where we came in search of policies, we returned with culture as the basic insights. The thing is actually that culture really creates policy. It's never the other way around. Policy is always downstream from culture, as they say. In the Netherlands case, what that means is actually if you have a country that is, to a large degree, as we heard so many times over the week, under sea level, that creates a certain mindset. I mean, for hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years, you Dutch have actually dealt with that very challenging geography. And it means that you have to work with your neighbors and just pumping the bloody water out or building infrastructure. And the funny thing about that is actually you do this even with neighbors you don't like. And I say this jokingly, I mean it really, because the thing is, if you have a neighbor who is not a very pleasant person and you don't cooperate with that neighbor, then you both drown. And therefore, you better cooperate. And that creates a certain mindset. The other thing is actually, if the neighbor doesn't actually pull his weight, and if the neighbor doesn't cooperate, you will tell the neighbor in a way that the neighbor will understand that. And I think that has also created a certain Dutch, well, forthrightness and culture, you might say. There's another aspect to all of that, and actually, you use whatever tools you can get because you want to make your job as easy as possible. So you use technology. You're very open to any kind of new technology that comes your way just to get the bloody water out. And in the 17th century, these were windmills. And now it's the delta works, the eighth wonder of the world, which we visited. And so you create this culture over hundreds of years, and it builds a certain mindset. It builds a mindset where you work with people you might not even like, where you're very open with each other, and where you use technology. And then you use the same mindset that you use to get the water out, to build hospitals, to build other infrastructure, to build a school system, to build an innovation system, to build a cluster network, whatever it might be, because you learned how this works. And for me, that is the specific cultural learning that we took from that trip. The other learning was actually our visit, of course, coincided with the NATO summit. Initially, that was a massive nightmare for us because people told us, you know, that the whole country is going to be in lockdown, nothing will work, every road will be closed, and it will be a complete disaster, and you won't get from A to B. In hindsight, I mean, that was probably very, very well meaning to warn us, but it was all completely wrong. Because what we experienced was the opposite. Because everybody had been warned to stay at home, we had the motorways to ourselves. It was never easier to travel around the Netherlands, and our tour guide was absolutely surprised how quick it was actually to get from Amsterdam, central Amsterdam, to the port of Rotterdam, so we arrived half an hour early. It's great. But anyway, the NATO summit also had another effect. Everybody talked about defense. So the one thing that really surprised a lot of our delegation was actually hearing defense, geopolitics, security, cybersecurity mentioned in practically every single speech, no matter who you talk to. We spent an hour over lunch with the head of Rabobank, and we didn't hear the word customer once. But he told us how many tanks the Netherlands has. 0.
No one, it's in a museum.
Yeah. True. In that sense, New Zealand has 1 tank too, but it's in a good start. We heard that then, of course, at the port of Rotterdam when the CFO told us that her biggest fear, or among her biggest fears, were underwater drones destroying the infrastructure. We heard it at the Dutch Stock Exchange, of course, the oldest in the world, where we spent about a couple of hours with the CEO of the Stock Exchange in Amsterdam, and he told us about the new ESG. I mean, we all know the old ESG, but the new ESG, as the Dutch redefined it at Euronext Stock Exchange, is energy security and geopolitics. And so for us, hearing all of this was a bit of a wake-up call, because we don't have these discussions in New Zealand often enough. And so it was, I think, a valuable lesson and a bit of a reality shock, really, for us, a reality check. So we learned that. And there was another thing, actually, and that is this specific pragmatism, which probably comes out of the water management history. And I just want to share this one story because it already shows that our little delegation visit had a political impact in New Zealand. And that impact actually happened about 2 hours ago. In case you missed it, the Regulatory Standards Bill passed 3rd reading and will become law. Great. Now, what does it have to do with the Netherlands, you may ask? A lot. I first heard this directly from David Seymour, and I can now openly talk about it because the ACT Party actually sent a newsletter a couple of weeks ago outlining how our trip contributed to the passing of the Regulatory Standards Bill. So what happened was, we were in Amsterdam on Monday morning, the 2nd day of our visit, and we hosted a delegation from ATR, that's the Dutch Deregulation Authority. So they've been going for nearly 25 years. We prepared them for the visit. I had a chat with one of their guys and briefed them on our new regulation ministry, on the Regulatory Standards Bill, because they were interested in just comparing notes, and they also wanted to know what we wanted to hear from them. And so I told them about the new ministry, the Regulatory Standards Bill, that's quite controversial, and they did their homework afterwards and read up on this. And so when we were in Amsterdam, in the Q&A session, one of the Dutch ATR guys said to our group, you know what, I find really strange. I've looked at this Regulatory Standards Bill that's currently so controversial in New Zealand. I couldn't find what is controversial about it. To us, actually, at the ATR in the Netherlands, this is just common sense. So what is all of this fuss about in New Zealand? Can someone please explain that to me? Okay. Quite a few members of our group took that quote to New Zealand, and apparently it reached Christopher Luxon. And he was told, can you believe it? We were in Amsterdam, and the Dutch asked us, so what is controversial about the Regulatory Standards Bill? It's just common sense. And apparently that pushed National across the line. And I can tell the story because ACT has now actually put this in a newsletter and sent it to all the supervisors. So ACT now says that a small delegation of New Zealand business leaders visiting Amsterdam helps in our fight for a Regulatory Standards Bill. So congratulations to the delegation. This is our first success, and it happened today. So in wrapping up then, I think I've exceeded my time. This was perhaps our best visit yet. I mean, obviously the most successful in a policy sense because we just got this done, but also because we learned so much. It really blended in quite nicely with some of the learnings from the previous delegation visits. And once again, and that's my final point, it underlined one crucial thing. A country needs to know what it is, and people in a country need to know who they are. Everybody in the Netherlands had the same story. The story always began with water and somehow ended with water, and in between you solved all the world's problems. That's quite nice, because it's a nice narrative. And it was a narrative that we heard from left, right, and center, from business and from academics. Practically everybody we talked to, this was their story. We are a country underwater, we work together with people we don't like, and we tell each other the way it is. And then we solve all the world's problems. And that's us. The thing is actually, in that sense, it was like the previous trips. The Swiss have their own story. The Danes have their own story. The Irish have their own story. And no matter who you ask in these countries, you get the same kind of story, with minor variations, but not much. If we did the same trip in reverse, after a week, our delegation visitors from the Netherlands would probably leave us very confused because they would hear 1,000 stories and would have no idea what New Zealand is. That is, for me, one of the key lessons we learned over these trips, that a country can only be successful if it knows what it is and what it wants to be. And that was my learning. That's why I enjoyed the trip. And we already look forward to the next one. Thank you.
All right, I'll put this on here. Good. Well, kia ora tātou, and thanks Sake and Charlotte for introducing us, Olive for those great words, EY for hosting us here. Dutch business people, friends of I have to say the Netherlands rather than Holland. It's not quite the same thing. I've learnt a few geographic things besides what my height below or above sea level was to the nearest 10 centimetres at all times, which everyone seemed to know when we're up there. But no, it's great to be here and reflecting, and also with such a success just in the bag, which we need to build on. That's only the first part of it. I might just have a sip of beer because right on the last day of the delegation, I kind of we went to the best Heineken brewery, and which makes all the American brewery, and there was just beers just flowing past at lightning speed. And we had a tour of this brewery and didn't get one beer. And so you've got to take your opportunities when you get them. And I've got a small scar, so I just need to have an extra sip before I get going. So
We should probably say it had nothing to do with our Dutch hosts.
no. We did make up for another way. So no, this was our best tour yet. I think we had a fantastic tour team, again acknowledging Ola and Chelsea and putting the whole thing together, which is very hard work from the other side of the world. And I felt very proud of our tour team, particularly when we all rocked in suited and booted to the Matariki celebration, which Chris Luxon was at because he happened to be up there for NATO. And so we rolled into the session there with our Dutch ambassador, who was actually in the halls of residence in Canterbury with me some time ago. And that was great to catch up with her. But when we came off the bus, it felt like saying, check out who's on my team, because it was about a quarter of New Zealand's GDP and we're all charging in. And it was sort of like, Chris, we're actually bringing some proper heft to this session. And it made me reflect that these 17, 19, 23 and 25 delegations are the largest in terms of representative delegations across the sector that leave New Zealand shores. I don't think even government ones exceed this. There was one just preceding our week in China where several of the team were. We were greatly impressed with what we learnt about the Netherlands and really enjoyed it. Positively surprised, didn't have much of a view, listened to all the podcasts. You've got a long time on the plane to work through it. And my most significant experience of the Dutch to date had been in sort of farmer meetings where there's a whole bunch of people with Van and Der in their surname and are the ones who are asking all the toughest questions of the Fonterra executive and directors. So it was great to get there. And my summary that I put on LinkedIn was sort of why ask why? And that to me was the takeaway of the Netherlands. They are very comfortable asking why. And we heard about the ATR, the Regulatory Burden or Standards Board or Deregulation Board. And Marika, who led that group, who we met on the Monday morning, it was a great start to the tour, explained the 4 questions they ask when anyone wants to put up policy. It can be overridden, but that document they publish is public. And it's what are you trying to achieve? Why do it? What are your choices? Will what you're doing work, and what's it going to cost in terms of 60,000 businesses times 2 hours times $50, and they had all their cost models. And it was just phenomenal how much drag they'd taken out of the economy and the dynamic response that was now happening in Parliament. So they asked why. Now, I did say to Marika at the end of that, you're a cost centre, you've got 20 people. The ROI for them on the Dutch economy, they'd already ripped out 5 billion euros a year, was horrendously big. I said, do you want to be a profit centre? Because you could just do this for New Zealand as well, just expand a little, or at least second some people down here, and then you'll cover your costs in a flash, and it'll be a good deal for both of us. But it was phenomenal, just the clarity that brought to policy making. And I think it's not just a central government thing. I actually think local government could do with that sort of transparency as well. The why ask why came up in the cyber cluster, where the person said, who was managing, said, all my people, these smart young graduates who are thinking about all sorts of algorithms and Russian hackers and things, I asked them to do something, and they just ask why all the time. And it's sort of, he explained that was sometimes a bit frustrating, but that was the live quality control. They're happy to do it. They just wanted to know what the point was. And if you couldn't explain the point, then they probably wouldn't have done it. And we would see that as insubordination. But actually, it was a really neat mechanism. So this asking why came up a lot. Very different approach to the RMA. I sense, and I'm involved in a couple of boards now where it has just been unbelievably long and difficult to do anything, because in New Zealand, the RMA starts with, let's take all the people away, certainly after 1642, and let's just start there and see what impact you have, which of course is not going to be, there will be an impact. The Netherlands designs itself around people and infrastructure and doesn't try to make an industrial state look like Milford Sound. It says, well, that's for industry, and we're going to reclaim the Rotterdam port, and we'll get some more land over there, and we'll do this. But then those bits that are supposed to be protected for nature are very, very preciously guarded. Rabobank was particularly fascinating. Live, while Donald Trump had landed, they were getting 10x the hacks out of Russian government to try and take out Rabobank while Donald Trump was there. And everyone had the same narrative, whether it was a research scientist or at the port or with Rabobank. Yeah, the tanks coming over there, and then we've got to rebuild the roads because they're not built for tanks. And so that's part of our increase to 5% of GDP. And then they're going to go over the Eastern Front over there, and we're changing our employment contracts not to deal with, shall I work on a Monday or Friday, and how much I can work from home, to deal with conscription. Right, so quite a different conversation that they're having with their Gen, what is today's lot, Gen Zers, to go get called to the Eastern Front. And it seemed quite matter of fact that they were expecting that there would be at some point a war. And that was fairly confronting for us in our far part of the world. The cooperate with people you don't like, even because you have to for common success or survival, was in great contrast to the, and if we don't have to, just leave me alone. I'll make my own decisions. I'll make my own mistakes. I'll ride a bike without a helmet. I'll do whatever I want. At high speed, by the way, boy, that is a weapon system. If you just get your enemies to walk on those red paths, which they say are red with English blood from tourists, no, they were really quite good and adept at saying we have to cooperate on this, and lots of conversation and stuff, and we have to be our own selves and take our responsibility on that. Great sense of humour, and I think this was one of the most endearing things, and quite a contrast to Germany. No, you are a very funny guy. You're an exception. He's a stand-up comic, this guy. No, but I would say, one of the people put up a pie chart which said, here's the time in the last 5 years where we have had a government and when we haven't had a government, which you can see as the majority, because they sort of had caretakers for quite some time as it kept on dissolving. In fact, it all erupted just before we flew up. I don't know. Have you got a government back yet? Have you got one? Yeah. Yeah, it sounds very Swiss. I mean, they didn't even know who their president was, and they didn't care because it didn't matter. A wonderful practical approach again. So wonderful tour, great tour team, learnt a lot, peeled back the onion very quickly to try and get to understand the why, which ultimately was that you did ask why a lot, and that leads to far more productive and better outcomes. Not free of issues. There's plenty of stuff to deal with, cost of housing, human capital attraction, all that sort of stuff. But it was a fantastic tour, and thanks again for your guys' support for it and all the tourists for a great tour.
Right. I'm really quite chuffed with, as a human capital consultant at EY.
Do you need that?
Do I? Maybe. Maybe I need to. Because that's two of my very favorite topics that you touch on, and that's culture change. And you talk about the why from Simon Sinek. So, sorry, I'm just making the link to EY for a second. Two very good topics. I just want to maybe kick off, and please, Charlotte, you just join in with questions as well, because it was a very interesting summary, and I'm very proud to listen to both of you and hear what impressed you. As an honorary consul, I go back maybe once every 5 years. So for me, it was 2 years ago since I've been, and it's really good to hear such encouraging stories, and that our rudeness or directness or willingness to not avoid difficult topics is actually a positive thing. So that was very nice to hear from you. Maybe you start with a personal highlight. You touched on the beer, but what you were obviously there for business and to learn about our country. But what's one of your personal highlights whilst you were there?
Oh yeah, you want to
No,
go
no,
first?
no,
Or-
no. Just,
I think a personal one was when we were at the university, the technical place where they were putting together a rail-based what's that? Vanagan, yeah, system, which was going in a European competition, which was going to be hosted in northern Netherlands. And there was two young women there who might have just finished their bachelor's degrees, who were working on this project, multidisciplinary project with industry all clustered around to try and get all the technology and welding and lathing and everything going on. And they won the competition with a piece of greenstone around their neck, which we'd given them as well. So for good luck. And lots of other special meanings. But so they were really impressive because we got there. It wasn't like the lecturers or the senior professors were going to take control. It was like these guys are in charge and they'll deal with it. And they must have just only been 20, 21, and they weren't. No one was intimidated, and that was very common. We came across people. It was just, yeah, you're here and we're here and we'll just have a chat, and it was all very kind of egalitarian in a sense, but they were really impressive and nice, and we were delighted to hear later on that they succeeded.
Awesome.
for me, obviously, stroopwafels. I mean, you can get them in New Zealand, but there is nothing like fresh. I mean, other thing is actually what Fraser mentioned, this sense of humor, the directness, and the combination of the two. We had a great speaker, Edwin van der Haar, who kind of doubled up. He is a scholar on international relations mainly, but also on the history and philosophy of the Netherlands. And then in his day job, he works for Eneco, the energy company. So he actually showed us one of Eneco's installations. But actually, on the first day, we had him in his function as a scholar. And so he introduced us to Dutch liberalism, basically. And actually, Edwin was a bit... well, typical liberal, not really happy with the state of the Netherlands today because it used to be better. I mean, we liberals are like that. But anyway, so he introduced us to the mindset, and then somebody asked, but what about the bike helmets, for example? Because we see that there's no health and safety. There are no road cones, by the way, in Amsterdam. I think we saw one in the whole week. I think the Aucklanders felt quite homesick. Anyway, so we asked about all this lack of health and safety. I mean, there were roadworks outside the hotel, and there was absolutely no road cone inside. You could have fallen into there. You could have hurt yourself. It would have been terrible. Anyway, so we asked him about that and the cycling helmets. And he said, you know what? I live in The Hague. When I see someone with a cycling helmet in The Hague, I know it's a diplomat, because bike helmets are for pussies, quote unquote. So I thought it was just wonderful. There's this directness. You say rudeness sometimes, but no, I think they're just direct. They don't hold back and they have fun. And he said it with a smile, and it was just wonderful. I would like to have a bit more of that here.
Well, I'll stay with you, Oliver. You talked a lot about culture and mindset shift, and how we had, as Dutch people, had to adapt over 400 years that we've been battling water since our kingdom's been around.
And sometimes you battle your neighbors, you know.
Well, sometimes we say a good buur is better than a verre vriend, which sort of means like a good neighbor is better than a friend who lives far away. So you better get on well with your neighbor. How do you, like, you've been away and you've been hosted by a wonderful country. What will you do when you come back to implement, or what do you think is necessary in New Zealand to make that shift that was so clear to you as a key learning?
Well, the thing is actually, after all of the 4 trips, and maybe members of our previous delegations could comment on that too later, we had a similar kind of response. On the one hand, we were super impressed by what we found, not just in the Netherlands, the other countries too. They had some really stunning things for us to learn and they impressed us. At the same time, this being impressed can sometimes become a little bit depressed when you then return home and you realize what you have to do just to become a little bit more like that, because there are some things in New Zealand that we don't do quite as well as the Dutch, the Danes, the Irish, or the Swiss. So what do we do about that? Well, in the first instance, I mean, realize that you can't legislate for culture. If the Netherlands stopped being Dutch, they would drown. And that means if you don't work together and if you lose that, you really go under, you disappear. If we don't lift our game, we don't disappear, we just become poorer. So in a way, that doesn't make it as existential. And that's the challenge for us here, because everything is, when you look around here, it's beautiful, it's nice. You can always go to the beach, the weather is nice, people are friendly. It doesn't feel as urgent than if we are declining. If the economy just grows maybe 1% less than it could, yeah, you feel it after a few years or a few decades, but it is not dramatic, it's not catastrophic. That's a bit of a challenge for us. So what can we do about it? Well, I think we need to travel more, because I think that really broadens the mind. If you travel and if you go to other places around the world, not just 4 countries we visited, go to Singapore, for example, and then, or actually go to Australia and take the Sydney Metro and see what asset recycling can do for you. You bring these experiences home, and then you ask yourself what we could do better and to shake us out of our complacency.
Yeah, well done. And Fraser, you talked a lot about the why and the why again. What is it that you would like your team in Tauranga, at the ports of Tauranga? What are you bringing back from the Netherlands that you will change? Well, one thing that you will change, or have maybe already changed or started to change since you come back from the Netherlands with what you're doing in your day-to-day role as CEO.
Well, not because of the tour, but we did sign a major contract with Dutch dredging, and
Thank
I
you for
met at Matariki celebration. I met the owner who bowled up to me, and he was an owner of a 300-person family-owned, him and his brother, family-owned firm, which does dredging globally, and they do dredge five of our ports in New Zealand already. So it was great to connect with them. But I think it's the challenge from the tours is always. So that's good, and we've got to be careful not to beat ourselves up too much as well, because there's a lot of things that those people visiting here would say, "Oh, I wouldn't mind a bit of that," because there's good and bad. It's not all tiramisu. There's some Brussels sprouts on the plate too, or what did you call that? Those waffles or whatever you had. Stroffles. So for me, it's how do we institute the change? We've now got very efficient at working through this, peeling back, not just thinking about tax rates and what happens when you go on parental leave and all these other bits and pieces. It's more nuanced, and that's why we got into culture in a big way on this one, and we could see it directly connecting and flowing through, and that's the design of a great tour, which was clever. But I think from all 4 tours, the art will still be is how do we get the change going beyond a conversation which might have happened in the right place at the right time with our Prime Minister for a bill that we needed to get through. There's 3 things that stand out for me, whether you've got high tax, low tax, land borders, not land borders, whatever, on all 4 tours. One is the quality of public policy, and that was achieved in different ways in different countries. But we heard about the ATR in the Netherlands, in the Swiss, the people are sovereign and they can vote all that stuff down with their national sport every 90 days of municipal, canton and federal voting. And they can even vote down law if they want it, right? The second one is the quality of public spending. And, in Switzerland, the mayor has to present a budget for 3,000 people on average every year. And so everyone can see both sides of revenue and cost. And in Denmark, they have a modernisation department which benchmarks all public spending, because there's a heck of a lot of public spending, and so they want to make sure everything is well spent. So the third one is it picks up on Oliver's point, having a very good, honest conversation about who you are and what you're actually good at, and not pretending to be something you're not, and being something you are and celebrating the things you're good at rather than just knocking them. And that's unfortunately in New Zealand, we're very good at certain things, but we kind of tend to not value those and what they do for everyone's well-being. So those are kind of the three common denominators out of the 4 tours.
Yeah.
So that's what we've got to try and do. I don't know how to do that. Is take all the politicians on the best of tour. So looking for volunteers.
There's a lot of in the report as well that everyone has received a copy of on the seat and those online as well. I don't know if you have an immediate question or otherwise. I'm also whilst Charlotte is thinking about that question, I'll give you the opportunity to think one if you have anything that you want to ask, so we can then go back to Drain.
Question for Fraser, the why and asking the why. Why do you believe that the Kiwi culture and mentality, typically, I mean, I'm generalizing here, but most Kiwis try to avoid conflict. They don't like conflict. They don't like to ask the why behind the why. Why do you think that is? Is that because of historic ground, or why do people in New Zealand get offended when I ask them why or why?
Yeah. And in my note, I said, it's not just that they ask why. The people receiving that question over there, which is more important, the recipient doesn't either get passive aggressive, openly aggressive, or just simply sulk or run away or do something, right? And we are world class passive aggressive in New Zealand. If we could export that, that would be good, right? I mean, we're good. I think we take great offence with people giving feedback. And you on the HR practice would see a lot of it. We just don't. We struggle to have conversations without it turning personal, and somehow the education system is going to have to help us with that, to have debate and discussion, as opposed to you're in that tribe or that tribe, and anything you say I don't like, and I do like this, even though I haven't even thought about what it was that you said. So culturally, well, we all got off either a waka or a boat from countries where we're trying to find our own space, our own land, our own position, because we were, in a certain case of coming from Europe, we're sick of being stuck in feudal arrangements and not having our own space and land and everything, and wanted control of ourselves. And so we like our island. And I'm not talking about the North Island, South Island. I'm talking about the freehold title that you sit on and go, that's my moat and it's mine. And it's we like creating our own little kingdoms, which we were trying to flee in the first place. So I don't know what the cultural thing is, but we've got to get a lot better at having conversations without just getting ready for a fight.
Now, all of it, like I really kind of see like complacent, being complacent, and it's kind of something that I really kind of noticed in business as well. And I just kind of like wonder where that's, because we've got lots of people from overseas in New Zealand, so there's a lot of that kind of culture to do better, but somehow we kind of, I'm struggling with it, but one hand because it's good that we kind of satisfied with what we have. On the other hand, it's stopping us from doing certain things because we don't really want to, we're kind of satisfied and we, create something and then it's fine. And we're not really kind of like striving for more. And I think being Dutch, having come here, you kind of always want to be your best and always want to achieve more, which sometimes can be stressful as well. But it's kind of like it creates good and bad things. How can we combine those two and have kind of that relaxing New Zealand and still achieving great results?
Yes,
Can you can do it?
It is really hard to combine. I mean, the easiest way would be to realize that the Netherlands is a little bit overpopulated and we've got a lot of space. So, I mean, what 500,000 or 1 million Dutch people would make of a difference in New Zealand, I could only imagine. But seriously, but no, seriously, I think the thing is, it is a very pleasant lifestyle we have here. It is a moderate climate. We are, of course, very friendly people, and they're all in the room tonight. And you can have a very decent lifestyle on a relatively limited income because it is just so nice here. All you have to do is walk outside of the door, go to the beach, or go for a hike and enjoy yourself. And it doesn't take much. And then we have kind of created this idea that if that's not enough for you, and if you really want to do something bigger, you can always go to Australia, London, or Sydney, or whatever, or New York. It doesn't have to be here. because we're actually quite fine, thank you very much. And combined with the attitude, the 2 degrees of separation, where you always run into the same people, and so you don't create conflict because it's too dangerous, because you will always know someone and they went to school together, or you work together, or you belong to the same golf club, or you sit on the same board. So you really don't want to piss them off. It's just too hard because you can't come back from it. Whereas in Australia, for example, the country is so big, you never meet again. So it's an advantage. I think if you combine all of these factors, you have a bit of an explanation, a cultural one, why we are like this. But I'm not the greatest expert on that. The best expert I've come across is actually Tony Smale. Tony Smale, the head of Forte Consulting in Blenheim, of all places, has spent the last 25 years of his consulting career trying to figure out the national mindset. So he is now consulting to international companies from English-speaking countries, translating New Zealand to them. Because a lot of the words are the same, but they mean completely different things. So Tony's summary of New Zealand is, the typical New Zealand conversation is, you wouldn't want a cup of tea, to which the correct answer is, I wouldn't say no. Right? I think we have to break out of that. And I totally agree with Fraser. We need to get into a position where we can have a productive disagreement and have a beer afterwards. And I think that's what the Dutch do.
We were just talking about cycling, and I remember the ambassador last time asked if there will be any cycling in Amsterdam. So I'm interested to hear if the tram tracks, if there were any little accidents.
We did get close to one person less coming home, and it wasn't because they drove into the tram tracks. It was partly because the brakes were on the pedal or something, and so you're squeezing the handlebars like crazy. And so one person banged into a person who was right on the edge of the tram coming past and just about shunted them into the tram. But we did have a good cycling effort. I was surprised there was no injury, really. I mean, it was a bit random, a bit chaotic. We went out to the beach in the Hague, Scheveningen, and then we got a talk from a woman that took us through how the cycleways and all of that came about, with very strong community movement saying, stop killing our children. Because of the way that cycles and cars and things were interacting, and hence quite a change to the way they set up the infrastructure for making cycling accessible. And now, of course, it's pedestrians and English tourists that are getting wiped out.
Any last questions from the room? Otherwise, we'll go to drink. There's enough space in this room to all congregate and network and talk to each other and tell each other other stories that we may want to share. I'm very pleased to hear from having visited 4 countries that the Netherlands made it to the top of that. I think that's the only thing that's missing on the front page. Go Dutch, but the best trip yet. It's the tagline that I
put a stamp on it. So
at least till number 1 when he gets back to New Zealand. Not too long. Thank you on behalf of the embassy for joining today. And I'm handing back to Charlotte, who's probably going to say something similar.
Yeah, because we have a little bit of a small thank you. Oh, I see Agnes is getting it, but thanks, Saka, for having us here at museum. Okay. Yes, so it's perfect. You mentioned.
Thank you.
And just a little thing. If you put them in the microwave for just under 10 seconds, you get a little bit of the market. Yeah, or on top of the coffee, you get a little market experience, but it's nowhere close. But
thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.